Our purpose is to make it so doing your taxes is no longer a thing and help every American claim every dollar that they're owed in credits and refunds by the IRS. So that is our purpose, and everything we do ladders up to that. Our hypothesis is that the current business model where tax companies offer product directly to a consumer has incentives that work against the consumer at the end of the day. And we
Oh,
think that a new approach, a new business model, a new product fixes the incentives and actually delivers a better product for consumers. If you were to start in 2024 thinking about how tax products should exist, you would actually start with the apps that people are already in today using, have data, and then you would work backwards into how tax should fit in with that. So our hypothesis is tax should be a part of the rest of your financial life, and that the incentives and products today actually don't align with how we help consumers.
hello, Gavin. It's a pleasure having you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks. It's so good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, this podcast is all about how we can create more purpose driven fintechs. So, what is your take? What do we need to do to build purposeful?
I think it all starts with the problem that we're trying to solve as a company, as an industry. And so it takes spending a lot of time with people in the world and understanding where things get hung up today. So this is actually the first company I've built in FinTech. And so I think something specific that I've learned in this industry is how much the current systems matter to the problems you're solving. So you can't ignore, unlike other software industries where you say, I'm just going to blast through and build something new. I think learning in FinTech, how important it is to understand the regulatory structures, how money moves, why things are the way they are. So I actually think we, at least when we started with a lot of humility, trying to understand why are things the way they are today. So I think that's a good place to start, is be a historian that can help as we're building these solutions.
Yeah, that's a very good point because I think there's two types of founders: the ones with financial services background that we know, regulatory. It's but that's good and bad at the same time because we take it for granted. And then we have the newbies, not the newbies. And then we have the founders who do not have financial services background. And then one of the challenges that they have is, oh, but I didn't know exactly. Didn't know how complex regulation is. I've heard about it, but didn't know.
And it's there for good reason, I think, is the other one. If you, at least this would be my take, if you're trying to start a fintech company, and if you're trying to start a fintech company and the regulatory part is you're trying to take advantage of it, is what I'm trying to say. That to me already seems like you are on a failed path. And so it should be much more around building software and products that exist well within and actually serve people better. The financial system has regulation for good reasons. And in the tax world, we have the same, right? There are regulations for tax companies that are good, like regulatory
Exactly.
guardrails are good. So
Yes. So actually, that's a beautiful introduction to then tell me a little bit more about column tax and what's your purpose?
our purpose is to make it so doing your taxes is no longer a thing and help every American claim every dollar that they're owed in credits and refunds by the IRS. So that is our purpose, and everything we do ladders up to that.
And as simple as it sounds, you
Easier
are
said than done,
solving
right?
a huge, huge, huge problem statement because like anyone who has ever tried to submit their taxes in any country, it's, oh my God, where did I leave that? Where did I leave the other? You don't have them. And then you're like, what? Is it still that big of a gap? As a solopreneur, not as a big company, just you're like, oh my God, I should have saved all these. And then you say, I will track this better this year.
This
Following
year for
year, it's
sure.
the same thing.
Yeah.
so, so it's a huge pain point for customers. So I'm very happy that you're doing something to digitize this and to make it easier for all of us. Even though you start in the US, like it inspires innovation everywhere. So when you got started, what was your hypothesis? What made you think that, yep, we're here to win because I believe this and the other.
Our hypothesis is that the current business model where tax companies offer product directly to a consumer has incentives that work against the consumer at the end of the day. And we
Oh,
think that a new approach, a new business model, a new product fixes the incentives and actually delivers a better product for consumers. And so we think our hypothesis is if you were to start in 2024 or 2020, thinking about how tax products should exist, you would actually start with the apps that people are already in today, using, have data with, and then you would work backwards into how tax should fit in with that. So our hypothesis is tax should be a part of the rest of your financial life, and that the incentives and products today actually don't align with how we help consumers. That's our hypothesis.
that's a very good point. Like a very good hypothesis as well, because we, I like what you said at the end, because we don't think tax like, yay, tax throughout the year. And when we think financial service, even someone like myself, that I've been working in the industry forever, it's the last of the things that we think about. First, you
Right.
think insurance. Insurance goes before tax. So
And
tax falls in the,
it
tax.
makes sense. It's stressful. And I think when we talk about financial health or financial stress in the other end of the spectrum, it makes sense. Asking people to take on additional stress it's not a really good way to get your product adopted. And so the goal should be make it easier, make it less stressful in order to help solve a problem for people. That's it in its purest and best form. You're right. People rightfully don't want to think about their taxes. We at Column should think about it all day, every day, so other people don't do. That would be our goal.
Sounds good. So coming back to impact, we've had a lot of progress as an industry, but still there's a stat that says there's about 3/4 of adults across the world that are still unbanked or underbanked, which is a lot. Therefore, my hypothesis is that even though fintech as we know it today has been around for the past 10 years or so, and yes, we have had impact because we have, and user experience has changed, and we have companies like yours, we have had impact. We have not had enough impact. Like the problem statement of financial stress is still there. And if anything, it has increased in the past 10 years, given macroeconomics, etc. Therefore, I believe we need to ask ourselves the question, how can we, as people building these companies, how can we have more impact? So the question for you is, what do we need to do today as fintechers to have 10 times more impact in the next 5 years, not in 10, 20 years, but in 5?
I think that I would start with a couple of things I've mentioned, starting with incentives, working back through the problems, and then also figuring out why things are the way they are. I could speak to tax. The tax industry has looked very similar since basically the 80s and 90s. And I think there's a bunch of good and bad reasons for that. And I think I'm like more adjacent to, let's say, banking or lending or credit and some of the other financial services components in the US at least. But every time I feel like I poke my head into those, there's 20, 30 layers of why things are the way they are. So I think in order to have impact, it's probably two things. It's thinking through, as I mentioned, the incentives that drive the behavior in those specific industries. And then I also think starting smaller is good. I think oftentimes there's a paradox when it comes to a venture-backed company, which is the world I know best. In order to found a venture-backed company, you have to have a grand vision, which is great. We should incentivize that. But actually, I think to your point, to make impact, oftentimes you have to start small. And those things are paradoxical. So I think helping build an industry where you are encouraged to do something really small. Great. We love that. We should do that. Not lose sight of the big vision, but in order to have more impact, starting smaller means you can make more progress quickly. At least that's what we think here.
Yeah, because then it's not what you are not saying is stay small. What you're saying is start small, which I'm going to paraphrase to you laser focus on what is the problem statement that you're solving, and then you do it really well.
Do it really
Then
well.
that allows you to grow, and then you have the impact.
And I think the other wonderful part about, if you believe that, the wonderful part that comes with it is you're probably wrong, but you don't know why. And so as I was saying, like you have those 20 layers of why and why things are the way they are. You don't know how you're wrong until you do it. And so normalizing okay, ship something really small that is impactful actually helps, I think, get quicker to the real solution, real problem, pairing that is so important for building. At least I find that to be a good model for both software companies generally, but FinTech in particular.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, let's assume that we had 10 times more impact in 5 years' time. How do we know that we got there? What is the thing that you could measure?
Of course, this is industry specific. Maybe I'll posit something for financial health and wellness generally, and then I can talk about tax and how I think about that. I guess I think about two things. The first is just fees, fines, penalties. Well, let's define like a strict measure of anti-progress. So I would measure things that solve those things for consumers, right? Financial health. You think about the individual balance sheet. Let's remove some of the silly cost items that drive against what we want in financial health. So I would measure, have we reduced fees, fines, penalties as one very direct measurable thing. I think the other thing that I would measure is very difficult to measure. I'm not even sure what metric you can put on it, but habits, right? So much of financial health and wellness in general in life is about the habits you form. I don't know how one can measure if we're tracking towards good habits. If there was a good metric, we should use that. Like we should be encouraging, as you said, to create that impact, we should be encouraging good habits. I think like removing the dollars that aren't going towards actual progress and building good habits. Those would be two things I want to track.
I'm going to ask a coaching question. What if you knew what that metric was? If there was a metric that measured habits, what could it be?
Yeah, what could it be? How can one measure? It's really difficult because I can't get out of the mindset of like, it's a bit paternalistic to tell someone what a good habit is. And so if you had an objective measure, which to me seems very difficult, if you had an objective measure, I think you would say, let's take something that we know benefits people in the long run. So much in my experience is trading off short-term needs for long-term wellness, which makes sense in a world where a large portion of people don't have liquidity or cash savings. You're always making that trade-off. That's a very real trade-off you're making day to day. So an example, like saving in a retirement account is a wonderful habit that supports long-term financial health and wellness, really well established and proven. In the US, we have things like 401k programs that help encourage those behaviors. So you could look at something like what percent of people are getting to save for long-term retirement. That to me is a sign of more financial health and wellness. It's a good habit, but you also need nested in there education about it, systems that make it easy. And I also think it's very difficult to say that is a barometer of success because there's so much outside of it around the short-term financial needs that it ignores. And yeah, those are like, maybe that's an example of what we could measure.
Yeah, but I love exactly that as an example. And I love how your brain started thinking through it, that yeah, this could be good, but how about this and this and this and this? It's cool.
Right. It's difficult for me in financial health and wellness to separate products, what we're building, the problems we're trying to solve, with actually just underlying issues that exist around economic inequality and earnings. So to me, it feels very difficult to say, oh, we should measure retirement saving when actually a minimum wage rate in America hasn't kept up with inflation. And it's very difficult to, if you do the budget, justify how somebody can live on the lower end of wage earnings in the US. So it's very hard for me to separate the actual reality of the financial system from how we want behavior to be. So that's why habit definition seems very difficult. But yes, there's something there around like all those incentives need to work together. If you like going back to your question, if you want to have 10x impact in this industry, all these things are at play. And so you would need some sort of way to measure this, not in the vacuum, because it is not in a vacuum, very much in the real world.
Yeah. And then just to build on that, let's assume that it's just role play. We get there, right? We're having 10 times impact. We found the right metrics to measure. And of course, now in theory, we are smarter than many years ago, and we're doing all these in a sustainable manner. So to make the scenario simpler, what does sustainability mean to you?
Sustainability has to be something that endures through adversity and can keep going. And I would break it down into component parts. Let's be really specific. So sustainability has to be something that people can keep using over time. And so that means product works, pricing works, systems work, you won't get in trouble. So you need to have the right recipe there. And then for the business side, I actually think this is important, going back to some of the things we talked about with venture backing, big vision, starting small. On the business side, sustainability means if you keep doing the activities you're doing increasingly better, the business will survive. Like you have a business model that works. I think oftentimes it is difficult to square being idealistic with having a wonderful business model. And those are not necessarily things that come together. So sustainability is something people can keep using over time, and it gets better. And businesses can continue doing their activities and it gets better. But really the unit economics have to work. The product has to work. All the pieces there have to work for it to be sustainable.
Love it. The bit that I'll add to that, then it's people.
People.
To have
Yeah.
purpose and impact, we need to make it good for all the people working within the industry to build all these. So what is your take on when it comes to leadership as such? How do we build an empowering culture for everyone such that we bring the best out of them and they are genuinely happy at work?
I think there's probably a couple things there. There's many things there. Okay, first, what I'll say is, again, I mentioned this is the first time I've built a FinTech company. And I would even start with role models or people to look at that set this tone and set this culture and drive both to building great businesses and having impact. So one of our early investors, Core Innovation Capital, really, I think, strong thought partner to me on that, strong partner to a lot of their portfolio founders. But I'd even start with who do I know in the industry that does this and sets this sort of tone within financial services. So I think back to people like Ariane at Core, who I think do a really good job at this. And then how do we actually build that within the industry? I think it starts with a bit of the culture, but it also starts with recognizing maybe that business returns and having impact for people are like, you can have both if you think through it from first principles and think through the business model. I think that's what comes to mind is like encouraging us to think through both end user impact and business impact and not thinking about those as at odds, but actually thinking about, can we get it right for both?
Yeah, I like that because even though we say, let me retract that. I love the idea of starting with looking at others who've done this well. So when we get started, or even if we're in an existing company, instead of starting from scratch, it's who cracked the code, right? Every company is different, but still tell me your recipe and I'll adapt your recipe to my company.
Yeah, exactly. And learning from others is the greatest gift when it comes to these things, because people have walked the path before. Yeah, start from that. What's worked, what's not worked. I also think being idealistic is great, but if somebody else can save you the path, walking the path from idealism to realism because they walked it before, amazing. save yourself the 5 years of pain and meet them and understand their journey and either buckle down and I'm going to take the pain and do it again, or do something different. Walking the path or learning from those who walk the path is a gift.
Definitely. So coming back to you, tell us more, but coming back, not to you, coming back to the problem statement of taxes as such. Every country has different taxing system, of course. Complex in all of them. I haven't heard anyone across the world. Yeah, it was so simple and easy and it was fun. Never heard anyone saying it's fun. But when it comes specifically to the US, can you bring us to life? What does the taxing process look like for the average employee? Because there's many type of people, right? Like for an employee.
In the US, the way taxation system generally works is the government, the legislative branch, passes law around taxes, around the tax code, and then the IRS is the one that implements that law into code and enforces that code. And so in practice, what that means for Americans is that over the course of a year, January to December, as you earn income, money comes to you, there's a requirement that you pay a portion of that in taxes to the US government, to the IRS. And so you either do that through withholdings off of a paycheck. Let's say if you're an independent contractor, you do that, at least in theory, by making payments, estimated payments quarterly to the government. And so as the year goes, you're paying a portion of your wages to cover the tax liability that you owe. And then at the end of the year, you do reconciliation. And IRS says, okay, great. We're going to do your personal P&L for the year. We're going to go look through your income, your expenses that you could deduct and write off in the great data aggregation exercise that is tax filing. And so at that point, people either do it themselves or work with a preparer in the United States to go get it all together and true up. So if you owe them the government money, you pay it then, or if they owe you because you over withheld or there's credits, you then get it back.
Sounds complex.
Yeah, it's wonderfully simple concepts that are very difficult in practice because the code has become so large and complicated over time.
Yes, exactly. The reality is, it is complex.
Yes.
And I think it's also because there's a term that I call that it's not in plain English. Like you're asking me to do things that, yeah, it's in English, but I don't understand exactly what you're saying. It's not plain English. It's not colloquial English that everyone understands. And like you say, there's so many codes and it's confusing. And I love this stat that is not mine. It's actually yours, that many people, like especially high net worth individuals, or not even high net worth, just like people with certain level of income, they hire professionals to help them with their taxes as such. However, 3/4 of Americans don't have access to financial advisors to help them with this, which is huge. It's a lot. So can you put yourself in the shoes of those people who don't have the financial advisor? And can you tell us what are their pain points that we're trying to solve for?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point, which is if there's a code that's so complicated to understand that the average person can't, which is the case in the US, if you're in a privileged position, you then hire someone else to understand and do it for you. And so what that means for the majority of Americans is that, at least in our experience, we find that the people we work with and help filing their taxes are incredibly financially literate, super on it, oftentimes know every dollar that's coming in and out of their account, and are very aware of how taxation impacts that, specifically refunds. So the way that tax refunds impact that. So we're really impressed with how well people generally understand refunds, time to money, how all of that works. What gets very complicated, rightfully for somebody who isn't a tax expert, doesn't spend all their time thinking about taxes, is how the actual underlying rules impact how much they owe the government and how much they might get back in credit. And so I think a lot of the stress that comes from taxes is because it feels like a black box. You put in some data about yourself and then some number gets generated on the other side, and it's really confusing what's in between. So I think that is the source of a lot of the stress.
Who are your customers then?
The whole idea for Column is working with fintech companies, banks, financial institutions to offer tax products directly to their account holders and end users. So we actually have two customers at Column. We have the partners that we work with, let's say like a neobank, and then we have their account holders who we actually help file their taxes. So we talk about it as two customers here.
Awesome. Basically, and it's just in the US.
It's just in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise you need to become a tax professional across the world.
As I mentioned, starting with US taxes is large enough. I think starting smaller is always better.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But I said that because in my mind, I was thinking, oh, it could be awesome if I had that service. But of course, I'm not based in the US.
Someday we'll work hard to get.
That's why I asked that question. So yeah, basically you're helping other companies offer better services to customers so that when it comes tax season as such, they can do it better. So what's the actual problem statement that you're solving? Can you go deeper?
Americans spend tens of billions of dollars and 5 billion hours every year to get their taxes done. Complicated, expensive process. Americans spend tens of billions of dollars and 5 billion plus hours to get their taxes done. It's a lot.
5 billion hours.
Hours. So many hours. Those are all based on IRS estimates. And
yes,
the reason the IRS measures that and talks about it is, again, tax code, 75,000 pages. And so in order to be both, there's two orders that I think about here. There's compliance. So you're compliant with all the rules and regulations as an individual. And then there's optimization. I've actually made sure me as an individual, I pay the least or I get the most back. It takes a lot of time, both to be compliant and to optimize against the situation that exists with the tax code. Yes, time and money. There's a lot of time and a lot of money spent just to be compliant, and then even more spent to optimize. And so the problem statement for us is very clear. How do we reduce the time and money spent on that activity?
Yes, it's very clear because it is a big problem message. Let's say if one of your neobank clients is using you, how does the user experience look like for me as a consumer?
The neobank or partner that we have already has a relationship with you, and let's say they have a mobile app. During the tax season, they'll typically add an entry point on the homepage that says, thanks for being a dedicated client. You get to file your taxes here. And when you click that, Column is embedded inside of the app, offering end-to-end the ability to file your taxes. And so one of the advantages of that setup is we've built it to be API first. So that bank, that company can actually pre-fill all the data that would go onto a tax return into Column to save people the time of not having to double enter data into the actual tax filing experience.
So basically what you're saying is that as a consumer, I have a big incentive of using this bank or institution as my primary bank just for tax reasons. Because when it comes to tax season, they have like many of the transactions just ready to go.
And then exactly.
Yeah, good. That is very clear if I, as a user, I am a registered business. But if I just an employee, I'm not a business, but still end of the year, I need to do this. How could the neobank know how to classify all these how do they know?
The way we think about it is Column can, could, and should flex whether the bank knows everything or nothing. So our product works regardless of whether everything is classified or not. Let me actually give a specific example. So you mentioned thinking about the future. As we look into the future, we believe a couple things. We think that more individuals in this country and the world, of course, will bank on their phone and computer. So that's moving online. We also believe that more and more financial data is moving online. getting digitized. For so long in tax, actually the whole paradigm of the industry is a piece of mail was mailed to you about things, and then you handed it to a human, or you did it yourself. So we believe people will be banking online, believe that data around your financial life will also come online, which crazy, is still not 100% there. And then third thing we believe is that data will become more open and permissible, and that people will actually be able to bring it with them. And so let's take payroll data as an example. Payroll is a key input into tax. We believe that the combination of those three things I just said will lead to a world where people have payroll data and banking data in one place. And there's wonderful companies doing this today, companies like Pinwheel, Atomic, Argyle, in the US, where they're making payroll data more permissible, accessible. What does that actually mean? That means that you'll be able to have W-2s automatically imported into tax products that exist within banks. It means year round, you'll be able to monitor what's happening on a paycheck and how it's impacting the tax situation of an individual. And so I think over time, those apps will be able to do more and more powerful things when it comes to tax, helping people and actually solving this time and money problem.
So what we're seeing is an end-to-end integrated solution where now it's my neobank, but then I'll have the neobank integrates with the payroll provider. So they have all this info. And
Which many
the
already use today.
neobank integrates with the tax, with the column tax of their country. And that's it. It's end-to-end, so that then my life is so much easier.
It should be so much easier. And I think what's nice is we're working towards that world today, and fintech and financial services at its best are all those things working together to make it easier. Like this shouldn't end up as 10 different apps with 10 different things. It shouldn't be one app that's very confusing. It should also be very seamless and delightful and work in the background. That's what I think success is.
Awesome. Okay. Now I have a good understanding of we've painted a good picture of what you're doing. And now I'm like, oh, cool, I should do that in my neobank. And I'll go and Google. And then there's tons of competitors, of your competitors doing similar. What makes you different?
I would say a couple things. One, the first thing would be some of the things I've talked about around data connectivity. So filing with a company that already has some understanding about your financial situation saves you a lot of time. Let me give a specific example of that. So we work with many partners, both in banking and self-employment. One example would be Found. So Found is a company that helps people classify transactions, like we had talked about, manage their taxes year round. And if you bank with Found and you're a Found Plus subscriber, you could actually use Column at the end of the year to take in all of the data that Found already has, pre-fill that into the experience, and then Column makes it really easy to go do the rest. That's one. So saving time as a result of data being pre-filled. Second is most of our partners, this is up to them. We don't govern their business model, but the whole idea behind Column is, for example, with Found, it's included in the subscription. Versus if you went to a third-party service, oftentimes if you're self-employed, for that person, $200 to $250, really expensive. A lot of money. So time based on pre-fill, money based on just the business model and how Column is structured is the second thing that I think we're better at. And then the third is Column is built to be lightweight. Like a lot of the existing products, a lot of the content in them is actually around upselling, going back to the incentives we've talked about. I think Column should be built just to get the job done and make it really simple and straightforward. And so that's the third thing that I think makes it just better overall.
I love that, because like you're saying, basically make it faster, saving you time and money. And then I asked you in a very different question 20 minutes ago. It's like, why do you exist? Or it's the problem that we're trying to solve for. And it's, saving people time and money. So that's what makes you different. It's not only the problem, but it's you make it better.
That's the goal.
It's all aligned, which is good.
It should all be aligned. And that's how I think Column is successful. We always come back to those couple things because it drives the product we build. It is a very strongly held mission of the company. And so it's nice to have a North Star that you can always come back to, especially for taxpayers. I think the other thing that's nice about like a second order benefit of what I just talked about is accuracy. When data comes from one place into another without someone having to be in the middle and type it all back in, you get more accurate taxes, which increases trust, which is actually such a key part. So yeah, time, money, accuracy, and trust. Those are the things that people tell us they care most about. So we try and build solutions around it.
Yeah. If I put myself in the shoes of your customers, e.g. a neobank, what are the challenges that I have when I'm working with you and integrating?
Yeah, neobank or taxpayer, which of those? Which customer?
A neobank.
Number one thing is you got to learn a lot about taxes. I've been talking about this recently. Like, in order to launch a tax product successfully, I'll give a really specific example. You actually have to learn a bit about taxes. And so we find actually day zero of working with a new customer, the first thing is just us educating. We think of ourselves, we're a partner, but once we sign a contract, we're an embedded product manager at that company. Like, we are there, we are with them, we are in it, and Column's all set up so incentives work. So hopefully they enjoy our presence. Like, we shouldn't be a nag. And so the first thing we do is we're like, okay, great. Here's what you need to know. So I think the hardest part is people are like, okay, great. I'm the PM of banking, but now I have to learn about taxes. And that's probably step one.
Oh, I'll build on that. So I'm assuming your clients are larger neobanks, I could say, because if you tell me as a head of product or CPO, you're like, hey, I have this idea. We need to fix this problem statement. It's amazing. And I go, hey, tell me, like, how, okay, tell me the feasibility and the viability of the product. And you go, oh, we need to learn about tax. Can we do something else? How do you pass that barrier of saying, oh, now the team needs to learn about tax?
I think there's two things. We work with companies of all sizes. So I'm amazed at small companies that can do this really well. I'm equally amazed at large companies that can work with a startup and move quickly. So I think on both ends of the spectrum, companies we work with, I'm generally impressed with how they launch new things, test, learn. I think they do a really nice job at that. So let's say we're working with a new company, they clearly see the same problem statement as we do, and they clearly see how it drives their business and why it should be at the top of their roadmap. We, I think, at our best, do a very nice job of making it digestible. So if they on their own had to go solve this problem, it would take them 10 years. Like, it is impossible. And so our
Not a
goal at
priority.
Column, yeah, it's just not possible. Their core focus is on making better banking product, typically, or better financial product. And so where I think we're hopefully, again, at our best, successful, is taking 75,000 pages of tax code, many years of pain, and condensing it down to be really simple. And so there are things they have to learn. You cannot launch a tax product without understanding the seasonality of the product, for example, and understanding things like low-income Americans are more likely to file earlier in the season than they are later. That is a key thing that I would assume most PMs at neobanks don't know until they get into tax. We take tons of experience, millions of data points, and can bring that to them, condense it, and so they get all the benefit from it being very simple. So I think that's how we do it successfully, is you do have to learn, but we hopefully have done most of the heavy lifting. That's success.
Yeah. And I think your secret to success is what you said at the beginning. Once you close the deal, you become a PM of the company.
Yeah, we're basically on the
That's
team.
it. It's I love that, because then that is the mindset that makes the big difference.
I think if Column thinks of itself as a sales company, we've failed. Because it's a B2B2C product, we like signing a contract. This is not success. It's wonderful. I love winning and closing deals. But success is actually when the product is launched, users are using it and people are coming back every year. And so if you take that as the goal, you actually behave very differently. And there's many times where we're talking with customers, we're like, hey, you're not ready. This is not the right fit. Like, in order to do this, you need this first. And if you take that mindset, one, I think it builds stronger relationships. And two, in the long run, everybody is going to win there. But yeah, we're embedded PMs that sign contracts, not salespeople. At least that's how we try to think of ourselves.
Yeah. I think you've set a standard for everyone in the B2B space, they should see themselves as I am an embedded PM.
That's success, I think.
Yeah, it's a new standard.
We also, to get there, you have to have good incentives though. So you can't, not all companies, I think, have as good incentive alignment as Column does. We've worked very hard. It's very intentional. That is the underlying physics you need in order to be able to act or behave in this way, I think.
Yeah. So now if I flip the question over to you, what are your top challenges then?
There's one that's definitely in the same vein, which is convincing people that what we've learned is true. Like helping someone unlearn some of the things they know around taxes. That's the other side of the coin that I just talked about. The other challenge is, okay, probably actually the biggest challenge for us is taking Column, which is a really powerful embedded product, and tailoring it in the right way with the partners that we have specific to their end users. Because trust is such an important part of what we're all doing, if you message it wrong, if you integrate it wrong, don't have the right setup, then the users get very confused, rightfully, about how does this work? And so I actually think the hardest part for us is this year we worked with over 30 customers. I, of course, know all 30 and think deeply about each setup. You have to do that. So I think it's hard as we grow to keep the personalized parts of Column in our launch. I think it's challenging.
That sounds like a good challenge. And I would love to ask you all these product questions as such. It seems like you have an amazing brain, but I'm conscious of time. And FinTechers now like getting involved in the podcast and being part of it. So we have a segment called It's Question from FinTechers. So I have a question, which I genuinely, it's like, it was not thought through like this, but you just talked about trust. And then the question comes from Kyle Bell, and he's asking, how are you building trust to give customers what they want in a quick span of time?
Well,
It's like,
very
ta-da!
prescient from Kyle.
I know. I was like, oh,
I love it. I swear Kyle Bell is not like a fake name that I put that question in.
no. It's like people who follow me know him. He types a lot in my profile.
Good question, Kyle. Yeah, I go back to some of the things that I've talked about here. Mainly, I think people derive trust for tax products in a couple ways. And so we try to ladder up to those. What are the consumers looking at in order to derive trust? They're looking at things like the ancillary things you offer. So Column offers a max refund guarantee, an accuracy guarantee, and audit support. So we know that customers are looking at, how do you help me if things go wrong? We also know that they want to understand the company, and lots of them will do, research on Column. And so we want to make sure that they can learn about us and what we stand for. And the third thing I think is what I mentioned about trust is specific to the partner we work with. And trust is specific to the relationship an individual has. And so we build trust by tailoring Column in. So when we work with a self-employment company, it has to be specific to that context. When we work with a bank, it has to be specific to that context. So we're there when things go wrong. It's tailored specifically into the environment, and that people can self-serve to understand us and what we stand for. Those would be the things we want to do to at least maximize the chance that someone trusts us.
Yeah. It's been a lovely conversation, Gavin. Thanks so much. There's one final question that is one of my favorite questions. That is, if there's one thing that you could change in the industry that has the most impact to customers, colleagues, and investors, what could that be?
I think we should celebrate starting smaller. Back to what I was saying
I love
earlier.
celebrating. Yeah.
Yeah, we should celebrate starting smaller and small wins while keeping the big vision. Like starting small is not antithetical to large vision. And so I think if we celebrated small impact in the same way that we do big vision, I think we'd see a lot more progress towards some of the goals that we have.
Yeah, it is. I love that. That's so aligned with my personal philosophy that I call it's the power of micro wins. You celebrate the micro wins, and then it keeps you going because you're celebrating rather than waiting till the day that you get a promotion and it never comes, or like the day that you buy the car and it never comes. It's more of a, hey, celebrate the micro wins. So we're saying the same thing applied to businesses. As an industry, we must celebrate every micro win that we have in the company at a global
I
scale.
love that. Micro wins. Exactly.
Yes. Amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Gavin. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom.
This is so fun. Thanks.
Thank you. And everyone, see you next week. Ciao.